Good morning to you all, and welcome to today's teaching. For a long time, many of us have read certain passages in the Bible and felt unsettled. Verses that sound harsh, violent, even difficult to reconcile with love. And one of those passages is found in the book of Numbers. But before we go into Numbers 31, let's pause and ask a simple question. If Jesus Christ said, "The kingdom of God is within you," and Paul the Apostle said, "Christ in you, the hope of glory," then wouldn't that mean the language of Scripture is pointing us inward? Wouldn't that mean what we are reading is not just about events happening outside of us, but processes happening within us? Because the Bible is a layered book, a book of symbols, patterns, poetry, metaphor, and inner language. And when symbolic language is read literally, it can turn a message of transformation into something that feels like violence. So today, we are going to slow down. And we will begin with Numbers 31. Not to argue, not to defend, but to understand. Because what if this passage is not describing violence toward people, but an inner process of alignment? So take a breath and let's begin. Before we go deeper, let's understand the language being used. Because if we don't understand the key words, we may misunderstand the message entirely. We start with Midian. Midian represents seductive influence or external desires that pull awareness outward. Vengeance means consequence of misalignment correcting itself. War is inner conflict between higher awareness and lower impulses. Kill every male is cutting off seed of destructive patterns. Women who knew man represents habits already entangled in experience. Virgin women represents untapped or unformed aspects of the soul. Remember, woman represents the soul, the emotional realm. So virgin women represents untapped or unformed aspects of the soul. Burn the cities means dismantling structured belief systems. Plunder means reclaiming energy, attention, and resources. This chapter, Numbers 31, is not revealing a violent God. It is revealing what happens when misalignment is confronted at its root. Median represents the influence that pulls the mind outward into distraction, desire, and fragmentation. Numbers 31 is about intervention. The language is intense because the process is decisive. Nothing is left half removed. Kill every male is remove the source of reproduction of the pattern. Burn the cities is dismantle the systems that sustain it. Take the plunder is reclaim what was lost in misalignment. This is not cruelty. This is total disentanglement. Because partial healing still leaves roots behind, and anything left rooted will grow again. Relatable example. This situation resembles moments where someone decides to fully break free from a destructive cycle. Example, ending an addictive habit and removing all triggers completely. Cutting off environments or relationships that reinforce unhealthy patterns. Deleting apps, contacts, or routines that keep pulling you back. Restructuring your entire lifestyle to support alignment. At this stage, it may feel extreme, but it is often necessary. Because when something has deeply entangled your life, gentle adjustments are not enough. It requires complete separation to restore clarity and peace. Now, let's begin. Numbers 31, verse 1 to 2. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Take vengeance on the Midianites." I'm summarizing the verse, okay? "Take vengeance on the Midianites. Afterward, you shall be gathered to your people." Lord spoke. This is inner knowing, awakened awareness. Moses represents the conscious observing mind, aligned with truth. Vengeance is restoration through consequence, not revenge. Midianites represents seductive influences that led to misalignment. Israel represents those who walk in alignment after wrestling with truth. Jacob wrestled with truth, and his name was changed to what? Israel. So Israel here is not talking about a people. It represents those who walk in alignment after wrestling with truth. Children represents new awareness or early stage understanding, not yet matured. Afterward, is completion of a necessary inner process. Gather to your people represents transition or integration or closure of a phase. This is not just about action. This is about identity. Israel is not merely a group of people. It represents a state of being. One who has wrestled with truth and now walks in alignment. We see this in Jacob's transformation. Before, Jacob was striving, grasping, navigating through perception. After wrestling, his name was changed to Israel, meaning one who has encountered truth and is changed. So, when this instruction is given, it is not to a random people. It is given to Israel. Which means this is what happens when awareness matures into alignment. At this level, you no longer ignore misalignment. You don't negotiate with it. You don't justify it. You address it. Because once you have wrestled with truth, you cannot return to unconscious patterns. And this is why the process is so decisive. Because Israel represents clarity after confusion, alignment after struggle, identity after awakening. And from this place, action becomes intentional and necessary. Modern parallel. This situation resembles moments where someone has gone through deep internal transformation and can no longer live the way they used to. For example, after questioning and unlearning, you begin to live differently. After healing, you no longer tolerate what once felt normal. After gaining clarity, you stop negotiating with things that disrupt your peace. You've wrestled, you've seen, you've changed, and now you move differently. Because alignment is no longer an idea. It has become your identity. You are now Israel. Next verse. So Moses spoke to the people saying, arm some of yourselves for war, and let them go against the Midianites to execute the Lord's vengeance on Midian. Symbolic breakdown. Moses spoke. This is conscious awareness, communicating truth internally. The people. This represents aspects of your inner life, thoughts, or faculties. Arm yourselves means prepare, equip with understanding and discernment. War represents inner confrontation, conflict between alignment and misalignment. Midianites, misleading influences or fear-based doctrines. Lord's vengeance, restoration of alignment through truth. Armor, spiritual tools for stability and clarity. How do we know this? Paul the Apostle, helps us understand this. The language becomes clearer through Paul. When Moses says, "Arm yourselves for war," Paul later explains what those weapons actually are. Not physical, but inward. This is why he speaks of the armor. Breastplate of righteousness is guarding your inner sense of identity and alignment. Helmet of salvation is protecting your mind with renewed understanding. Belt of truth is grounding yourself in what is real and consistent. Shield of faith is remaining steady when old fears try to return. Sword of the Spirit is using truth to cut through false beliefs. This is the same arming Moses is pointing to. Because the battle is not against people. Paul told you, we wrestle not against flesh and blood. It's not against people. It is against distortion. Distortion about who you are, what God is like, what truth actually is. So when you begin confronting fear-based doctrines, you don't do it with anger or force. You do it with clarity, understanding, and stability. Because without this armor, you can easily fall back into confusion or swing into another form of imbalance. So the preparation is essential because truth must not only be discovered, it must be sustained. Modern parallel. This situation resembles moments where someone begins to challenge deeply rooted beliefs, but does so with intentional grounding. For example, studying scripture with context instead of reacting emotionally. Replacing fear-based thinking with clarity and understanding. Staying rooted in peace, even when confronting uncomfortable truths. You are not just tearing things down. You are building stability as you do it. Because true transformation is not just about what you remove, but also what you establish in its place. It's not about deconstruction, but reconstruction. You need to reconstruct when you deconstruct. And that is why the armor matters, because it allows you to stand in truth without being shaken. The entire Bible is about deconstruction. It was written for us. But because it's an inner event, they had to use war imagery, something to describe inner events. That's why we saw it as violent. That is all pointing inward. How do we know this? Jesus was against the religious leaders, against religion, because religion divides. Religion doesn't portray God the way he should be portrayed. So if God was in Christ, reconciling the world to himself, and if Peter says God was the one doing the works through Jesus, then who was against religion? The Father himself. Because the Father was the one working through Jesus. So God is against religion. The Father wants to have a relationship with you, not religion. So the entire Bible is about deconstruction. Moving on to Numbers 31 verse 4. From each tribe of Israel, you shall send 1,000 to the war. Symbolic breakdown. Tribe represents dimension or aspect of inner life or identity. Israel represents those walking in alignment after wrestling with truth. 1,000 represents fullness or magnitude or completion of a cycle. Send is intentional release into action. War is inner confrontation between truth and misalignment. This verse introduces order and structure into the process, not chaos, not emotional reaction, but intentional, complete engagement. 1,000 from each tribe points to full participation across every aspect of your being. Nothing is left out. No compartment remains untouched. And the number 1,000 carries a deeper symbolic weight. Throughout scripture, it often signals magnitude, fullness, completion. We see this echoed in 1,000 years as one day before the Lord. This is divine perspective beyond human limitation. We see it echoed in Satan released for 1,000 years, which is a complete cycle reaching its end. So here, it is not about a literal number. It is about the process being thorough and complete. Every tribe, which is every part of your identity, must participate. Because partial alignment still leaves room for misalignment to return. This is why the engagement is structured. Each part of you must be aware, involved, and aligned so that the transformation is not surface level, but total. Modern parallel. This situation resembles moments where someone realizes that change cannot be selective. For example, not just changing thoughts, but also habits and environments. Not just understanding truth, but applying it in daily life. Not just addressing one issue, but examining patterns across all areas. You begin to see everything is connected. And real transformation requires consistency, intentionality, and full participation. Because true alignment is not partial, it is holistic. It touches every area of your life until the process is complete. Moving on to next verse. So, there were provided out of the thousands of Israel 1,000 from each tribe, 12,000 armed for war. Provided is made ready or brought into readiness. Thousands of Israel is fullness of aligned awareness. 1,000 from each tribe is complete participation from every aspect of your being. 12 is governmental order or structure or divine arrangement. Armed is equipped with truth, discernment, and stability. War is inner confrontation or dismantling misalignment. Now we see organization and readiness fully formed. What was instructed in the previous verse is now established. Provided 12,000 armed for war. This is not random. This is alignment becoming structured and operational. The number 12 is significant. It represents order, governance, and structure. We see this pattern throughout scripture. 12 tribes, 12 apostles. So here, 12,000 is not just a number. It is showing complete ordered readiness across the whole being. Every part of you is now aware, aligned, and equipped and ready to engage. No longer scattered, but unified. No longer confused, but structured. And this is important. They were not just present, they were armed. Meaning, you are not entering this process unprepared. You now have clarity to recognize misalignment, discernment to challenge it, stability to remain grounded in truth. This is the shift from awareness to readiness. Modern parallel. This situation resembles moments where everything within you comes into agreement about the need for change. For example, Your thoughts, decisions, and actions begin to align. You stop going back and forth and become consistent. You feel internally settled about what needs to be done. You are no longer confused, hesitant, or divided within yourself. Instead, you are clear, you are grounded, and you are ready. Because true transformation happens when your entire being moves in the same direction. Next verse. And Moses sent them to the war, 1,000 from each tribe, them and Phinehas the son of Eleazar the priest, with the holy instruments and the trumpet for signaling in his hand. Moses sent. This is conscious awareness directing action. 1,000 from each tribe. Complete participation across all aspects. Phinehas, zeal for alignment or decisive discernment. Priest represents mediator between inner awareness and action. Holy instruments represent sacred tools. What are they? Truth, discernment, spiritual insight. Trumpets represent signals or inner alerts or awakening prompts. Hand represents authority or active expression. Now we see that this process is not just about being ready. It is about being guided correctly. Moses sent them shows that awareness is now not just seeing, not just preparing, but directing. And then we are introduced to Phinehas. This is important. Phinehas represents zeal for alignment, not passive awareness, but a deep conviction that says, I will not allow misalignment to continue. This is the part of you that acts with clarity and precision, not hesitation. Then we see holy instruments. These are not physical objects. They represent the tools you now carry. Truth that cuts through confusion. Discernment that distinguishes what is aligned versus what is not. Awareness that keeps you grounded. And then, trumpets for signaling. This is powerful. Trumpets represent inner alerts. The ability to recognize when something is off. To sense misalignment quickly. To respond before patterns take root again. This is no longer unconscious living. You are now aware, sensitive, and responsive. And everything is in his hand, meaning this is now active within you, not external, not dependent on others, but something you carry and operate from. Modern parallel. This situation resembles moments where you don't just understand truth. You begin to live by it in real time. For example, sensing immediately when something feels off and addressing it. Having strong discernment about what aligns with your values. Acting quickly when you recognize old patterns trying to return. You are no longer easily influenced, no longer slow to recognize misalignment. Instead, you are alert, you are guided, you are responsive. Because transformation is not just about what you remove, but also how you stay aligned moving forward. And that requires discernment, awareness, and continual inner guidance. Next verse. And they warred against the Midianites, just as the Lord commanded Moses, and they killed all the males. They warred. Active inner confrontation. Midianites, misleading influences or seductive patterns. As the Lord commanded, alignment with inner truth. Not self-driven reaction. Killed. This is ended or removed or cut off. Males represent seed or source or reproductive aspect of patterns. Now the process moves from preparation into execution. They warred. This is no longer theory, no longer awareness alone. This is active engagement. And notice, as the Lord commanded Moses. This is important. This is not emotional reaction, not anger, not rebellion. This is aligned action. Meaning, you are not reacting from hurt. You are responding from clarity. And then comes the strong language. They killed all the males. This is where many struggle when reading literally. But symbolically, this is precise. Males represent the source, the seed, what reproduces the pattern. This means they didn't just deal with symptoms, they addressed the root. Because if the source remains, the cycle continues. So this is not about distraction for its own sake. It is about ending the ability of the patterns to reproduce. This is deep transformation, not surface level change, but root level removal. Modern parallel. This situation resembles moments where someone stops managing symptoms and begins addressing the root cause. For example, not just coping with anxiety, but addressing the beliefs fooling it. Not just avoiding toxic cycles, but understanding what keeps recreating them. Not just setting temporary boundaries, but removing the root triggers entirely. This is where change becomes decisive, intentional, and complete. Because you realize, if the root remains, the pattern returns. So true transformation happens when you cut off what keeps the cycle alive. Next verse, Numbers 31, verse 8. They killed the kings of Midian, Evi, Rechem, Zah, Her, and Reba. They also killed Balaam the son of Beor with the sword. Symbolic breakdown. Kings represent ruling beliefs or governing patterns. Remember Paul? We wrestle against what? Principalities, against powers, rulers of darkness. It's not talking about demons. It's not talking about unseen beings. No. It's talking about ruling beliefs, governing patterns. And that's why Paul would say what? Casting down imaginations and every high thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of God. Because the battleground is the mind. The mind. That's why he would say, be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind. So the battle is not against humans. It's not against flesh and blood. And it's not saying it's against demons or unseen beings. No. Spiritual warfare is against ruling beliefs, fear-based doctrines, governing patterns. That's what the spiritual warfare is about. So kings represent ruling beliefs or governing patterns. Midian represents misaligned influences or seductive systems. Named kings represent specific dominant thought patterns or strongholds. Balaam represents distorted guidance or misused spiritual insight. Sword represents truth or discernment that cuts through deception. Remember Hebrews 4:12. The word of the Lord is like a double-edged sword. So sword represents truth or discernment that cuts through deception. Now we move beyond the seed into what governs the system. As said earlier, kings represent the ruling ideas. These are not surface thoughts. They are core beliefs, dominant narratives, internal authorities that shape perception. So removing the kings means dismantling what was in control. Do you see the language? Removing the kings. Paul says what? Casting down imaginations. Revelation says what? The accuser was cast down. So removing the kings means dismantling what was in control. Not just what appeared on the surface, but what was driving everything underneath. And then we see something very important. Balaam. Balaam represents insight without alignment, spiritual knowledge used incorrectly, Guidance that appears right, but leads to misalignment. This is powerful because it shows not all influence is obviously wrong. Some things sound spiritual, sound wise, sound convincing, but still lead away from truth. So Balaam being removed means even distorted spirituality must be confronted. Not just obvious error, but subtle misdirection. And the sword represents truth that cuts cleanly. No confusion, no compromise, just clarity. Modern parallel. This situation resembles moments where someone begins to question not just behaviors, but the beliefs behind them. For example, realizing that certain teachings sounded spiritual but created fear or limitation, fear-based doctrines. Identifying core beliefs like I am not enough or I must earn love. Recognizing guidance that felt right emotionally but led to confusion or dependency. At this stage, you are no longer just changing actions. You are challenging what has been governing your thinking. Because you understand, transformation is not complete until the root beliefs are addressed. And that includes even the ones that once seemed right. So, you begin to use truth to discern, separate, and realign at the deepest level. Next verse. And the children of Israel took the women of Midian captive with their little ones, and took as plunder all their cattle, all their flocks, and all their goods. Symbolic breakdown. Children of Israel means those walking in alignment. Captive is brought under control, no longer operating freely. Women represents expressions of patterns or systems. Little ones represents immature awareness or developing thoughts. Cattle represents the conditioned self or learned behaviors. Remember Genesis 3. Now the serpent was more subtle than all the beasts of the field. That's your instincts. Your raw instincts. That's what beast means. So cattle represents the conditioned self or learned behaviors. Plunder is reclaiming what was misused. War language is internal process of transformation. Now, the language becomes unmistakable when we connect it with Paul. We see the same pattern: war, captivity, transformation. What does Paul say? bringing every thought into captivity to the obedience of Christ. Be transformed by the renewing of your mind. This is the same process being described in symbolic form. Taking captive does not mean suppression. It means bringing under awareness and alignment. So your thoughts are no longer random, reactive, or shaped unconsciously. Instead, they are examined, they are aligned, they are intentional. This is the real war. Not against people, but against patterns of thinking. And this is why renewal is necessary. Because transformation does not happen by ignoring thoughts or forcing behavior. It happens by renewing the mind, which means replacing distortion with clarity, replacing fear with understanding, replacing inherited beliefs with truth. So, what we see in Numbers 31, Paul explains directly. It is the process of confronting, capturing, and realigning everything within you. Relatable modern parallel. This situation resembles moments where you begin to take responsibility for your inner world. For example, noticing negative or fear-based thoughts and questioning them. Choosing not to let old beliefs run automatically. Becoming intentional about what you accept as true. Instead of being led by your thoughts, you begin to lead them. And this is where real change happens. Because you realize your life follows your thinking. So transformation begins when you bring every thought into alignment with truth. Next verse. And they burned all their cities where they dwelt, and all their encampments with fire. Burned represents purification or complete removal. Cities represent structured systems or established belief frameworks. Dwelt, where patterns lived and were sustained. Encampments, temporary setups or habits or environments. Fire represents truth or refinement or purification. Now we move beyond individuals and patterns into systems and structures. Cities represent organized belief systems, frameworks that supported certain ways of thinking, environments where those patterns were normalized. Encampments represent temporary habits, recurring behaviors, situations you repeatedly found yourself in. And what happens? They are burned with fire. This is not distraction for the sake of distraction. This is purification and dismantling. Because even if you remove the roots, the males, the governing beliefs, the kings, or the distorted guidance, Balaam, if the structure remains, the pattern can return. So the fire represents truth exposing everything. Refinement removing what cannot remain. Clarity dissolving what was built on distortion. This is deep work. Because it's not just about what you think. It's about what has been built around those thoughts. Modern parallel. This situation resembles moments where someone not only changes internally, but restructures their entire environment. For example, stepping away from communities that reinforce fear-based thinking. Changing routines that keep you in old cycles. Removing influences, media, conversations, environments that contradict your new awareness. You begin to realize it's not enough to think differently. You must also live differently. Because environments reinforce patterns. So true transformation includes dismantling old structures and creating space for new alignment. And sometimes that requires letting certain structures go completely so that something new can be built on truth. Numbers 31:10 is where the imagery of fire becomes unmistakable across scripture. The burning of cities is not about destruction for its own sake. It is about complete purification. Nothing partial, nothing hidden, everything exposed and refined. This is the same pattern we later see described as the lake of fire, often misunderstood as punishment. But symbolically, it represents total refinement. A process where everything false is consumed, where everything misaligned is dissolved, where everything built on distortion cannot remain. That's why the book of Revelation is called the unveiling of you, your true self. It's not a book of terror. That's why it's highly symbolic. But many people read it literally and create fear and panic, which is not there. The lake of fire is where everything built on distortion cannot remain. Total purification, total refinement. Because fire throughout scripture consistently represents truth, purification, refinement. Our God is what? A consuming fire. Truth. We see it as the refining fire that purifies gold. The fire that reveals what is built on each foundation. So when the cities are burned, it means the entire system that supported misalignment is fully dissolved, not suppressed, not hidden, but completely brought to an end. Because partial purification still leaves residue, but fire leaves nothing untouched. Modern parallel. This situation resembles moments where transformation becomes so deep that entire belief systems collapse. For example, realizing that foundational teachings you held were built on fear. Experiencing a complete shift in how you see yourself, God, and life. Letting go of entire frameworks, not just individual ideas. At this stage, it can feel intense because it's not just small adjustment, it's a complete reset. But this is necessary because true transformation is not about modifying old systems. It is about allowing what is not aligned to be fully dissolved so that what remains is built on truth. And that is what the fire represents. Not punishment, but purification that restores clarity. Next verse. And they took all the spoil and all the plunder, both of man and of beasts. Took is intentionally gathered or brought into awareness. Spoil or plunder. What was recovered after misalignment was removed. Man represents conscious patterns or identity structures. Beast represents your instinctual nature or your raw drives. Gathered together is integration or no longer divided. This is no longer about confrontation, removal, or purification. This is about integration. Everything that remains is now brought together, not scattered, not in conflict, not divided, but unified. This is what Paul describes as being one with Christ. Not in a mystical external sense, but as alignment of your entire being, where your thoughts, your identity, and your nature are no longer in opposition, but functioning as one. This also echoes Genesis. A man shall leave his father and mother and cleave unto his wife, and they shall be one flesh. One, which means joining, uniting. So the full pattern is leave, separation from misalignment, confront, inner war, purify, fire, gather, integration, and cleave, become one. This is the journey of transformation, not fragmentation, but unity, where nothing within you is fighting, resisting, or divided. Everything is now aligned and integrated. Modern parallel. This situation resembles moments where after deep transformation, you begin to feel whole. For example, your thoughts and actions start matching your values. You no longer feel like you are two different people in different situations. Your instincts, emotions, and decisions begin to align. You are no longer conflicted internally or pulled in opposite directions. Instead, you feel integrated. You feel grounded. You feel whole. Because true transformation is not just about removing what was misaligned. It is about becoming one within yourself. And that is what this moment represents: alignment, integration, and oneness. Next verse. And they brought the captives, the plunder, and the spoil to Moses, to Eleazar the priest, and to the congregation of the children of Israel, to the camp at the plains of Moab, by the Jordan across from Jericho. Symbolic breakdown. Brought is presented or made visible or brought into awareness. Captives is thoughts and patterns now under alignment. Plunder or spoil, recovered energy, habits, and resources. Moses represents conscious awareness or understanding. Eleazar the priest represents discernment or spiritual mediation. Congregation is your whole inner being. Kings represents governing authority within. Priests represents discernment and alignment with truth. Jordan represents transition into a new state. Jericho represents next stronghold or threshold before breakthrough. Now everything that has been confronted, purified, reclaimed, and integrated is brought into full awareness. Nothing hidden, nothing unconscious. Everything is now seen, understood, and aligned. We see he has made us kings and priests, a royal priesthood, a holy nation. Because what we are seeing here is the union of authority and discernment. Moses represents awareness. Eleazar the priest, discernment. Israel, aligned being. Together, this reflects kingship and priesthood within you. King governs. Priest discerns. So now, your thoughts are governed. Your patterns are examined. Your actions are intentional. You are no longer led unconsciously, reacting blindly, or following external control. Instead, you govern your inner world and you discern what aligns with truth. This is what it means to be a royal priesthood, not a title, but a state of being where authority, king, and discernment, priest, work together in harmony. Modern parallel. This situation resembles moments where someone becomes fully responsible for their inner life. For example, making decisions from clarity instead of pressure. Discerning what aligns instead of following trends or fear. Taking ownership of thoughts, habits, and direction. You are no longer waiting to be led. no longer dependent on external validation. Instead, you lead yourself, you discern clearly, you govern wisely, because transformation has brought you to a place where you function with both authority and discernment within. And that is what this verse is revealing. The emergence of a whole, aligned, and self-governed being. Next verse. And Moses, Eleazar the priest, and all the leaders of the congregation went to meet them outside the camp. Moses represents conscious awareness. Eleazar the priest, discernment or spiritual insight. Leaders, governing faculties or matured aspects of the mind. When to meet, intentional examination or engagement. Outside the camp, place of evaluation before integration. Now we see something very important. Not everything is immediately integrated. Even though the battle has been fought, the patterns have been captured, the resources have been gathered, there is still a step, evaluation. Moses, Eleazar, and the leaders went to meet them. This shows that awareness, Moses, discernment, priest, governance, leaders, all come together to examine what has been brought forward. And where does this happen? Outside the camp. This is key. The camp represents your current state of alignment. So before anything enters fully into your life, it must be examined outside. This is the space of reflection, discernment, and testing. Not rejection, but intentional evaluation. Because not everything that is captured is ready to be integrated as is. Some things must still be refined, understood, and adjusted. Modern parallel. This situation resembles moments where, after gaining new awareness, you pause before fully integrating everything. For example, reflecting on new beliefs before fully adopting them. Examining habits or patterns before bringing them into your daily life. Taking time to discern what aligns and what still needs adjustment. You don't rush. You don't assume everything is ready. Instead, you evaluate. Because true transformation is not just about change. It is about wise integration. So you begin to ask, does this align with truth? Is this stable? Is this ready to be part of my life? And that is what this moment represents. Discernment before full integration. This moment connects directly to Genesis 3, the flaming sword. We are told there was a flaming sword turning in every direction, guarding the way to the tree of life. This is not a physical weapon. It represents continuous active discernment. Truth that examines from every angle allows nothing misaligned to pass through unnoticed, ensures that only what is aligned enters. So when we see outside the camp, it is the same space as the guarded entrance. Nothing enters the place of alignment casually. Everything must pass through the sword, which is truth, discernment, awareness that sees clearly. And this is why Moses, awareness, Eleazar, discernment, and the leaders, governance, meet everything outside the camp. Because this is where the sword is active, testing thoughts, patterns, what has been gathered, before allowing it into full alignment. This shows something powerful. Access to life, alignment, or wholeness is guarded by discernment, not to keep you out, but to ensure that what enters is true. Modern parallel. This situation resembles moments where you develop a level of discernment that evaluates everything before accepting it. For example, questioning thoughts before believing them, examining teachings before adopting them, sensing whether something aligns before allowing it into your life. You don't just accept things anymore. You discern from every angle because you understand not everything should be allowed into your inner world. And this flaming sword becomes your awareness, your discernment, your ability to examine truthfully. So nothing enters your life without being tested, examined, aligned. And that is what this moment represents. Discernment guiding alignment from every direction. Next verse. And Moses was angry with the officers of the army, with the captains over thousands and captains over hundreds, who had come from the battle. Symbolic breakdown. Moses, as you already know, represents conscious awareness. Angry, strong recognition of misalignment, not emotional reaction. Officers or captains, governing thoughts or decision-making patterns. Thousands or hundreds, structured levels of influence within the mind, came from the battle after confrontation and transformation process. Now we see something very important. Even after the battle, something was not fully addressed. Moses was angry. This is not emotional anger as we commonly understand it. It represents clear, uncompromising awareness. The moment you realize something is still not right, even though the war was fought, the patterns were confronted, the systems were dismantled, something was overlooked. And who is addressed? The captains and officers. These represent the parts of you responsible for decision making, the internal leaders that govern your actions. This shows even your governing patterns can miss things, even after growth, even after effort. And awareness, Moses does not ignore this. It addresses it directly, because partial transformation still leaves room for misalignment. This is a refining moment, not condemnation, but correction, where awareness says we need to go deeper. Modern parallel. This situation resembles moments where you realize that even after making changes, something still doesn't fully align. For example, thinking you've moved on from something, but noticing subtle patterns still remain. Making progress, but realizing certain beliefs were not fully addressed. Doing the work, but seeing that some areas were overlooked. At this stage, you don't ignore it. You don't justify it. Instead, you refine further. Because true transformation is not about partial change. It is about complete alignment. So awareness steps in again, not to condemn, but to bring clarity and completion. And this is what this moment represents: the willingness to go deeper when something is still unresolved. Next verse. And Moses said to them, "Have you kept all the women alive?" Moses said, this is conscious awareness questioning. Kept alive, allowed to remain or preserved. Women, expressions or manifestations of patterns. All, completeness or nothing excluded. Now awareness begins to question the outcome. Have you kept all the women alive? This reveals something that should have been addressed was preserved instead. Women here represent how patterns express themselves, the outward manifestation of underlying systems. So while the root, males, was addressed, the governing structures, kings, were removed. The expressions of those patterns were still present. This is subtle but powerful, because it shows you can remove the root, but still hold on to the expression. And if the expression remains, it can eventually recreate the pattern. This is why awareness responds, not to condemn, but to expose what was overlooked. This is the stage of deeper refinement, where you begin to see, I removed the source, but I still kept part of the outcome, and that must now be addressed. Modern parallel. This situation resembles moments where someone realizes they have let go of a root issue, but still hold on to its expressions. For example, leaving a toxic environment, but keeping the same thought patterns. Rejecting fear-based teachings, but still thinking from fear. Ending a cycle, but maintaining habits shaped by that cycle. At this stage, you begin to ask, what am I still holding on to? Because transformation is not complete until the root is removed and the expressions are also addressed. This is where awareness becomes even more refined. Not just looking at what started the pattern, but also what continues to reflect it. And that is what this moment represents. The exposure of subtle remnants that still need alignment. Next verse. Behold, this caused the children of Israel through the counsel of Balaam to trespass against the Lord in the matter of Peor, and there was plague among the congregation of the Lord. Symbolic breakdown. Caused, influenced, or became the pathway. Children of Israel, those walking in alignment. Counsel, advice, or teaching, or influence. Balaam, distorted spiritual guidance. Trespass, deviation from alignment. Peor, place of compromise or misdirected desire. Plague, consequence, or disruption spreading through the system. Congregation, the whole inner being. Now everything becomes clear. This is where the misalignment started. This caused Israel through the counsel of Balaam. This shows it was not random. It came through influence, teaching, guidance that appeared valid but led away from truth. Balaam represents distorted understanding, not obvious error, but subtle misdirection. And the women expressions were the pathway through which that influence entered. So Moses is saying, these are not neutral. These are connected to what led you into misalignment in the first place. And then we see there was a plague. The plague represents the spread of confusion, the ripple effect of misalignment, how one distortion can affect the whole system. Because when misalignment enters, it doesn't stay contained. It spreads through thoughts, emotions, and behaviors until it affects the entire congregation, your whole being. Modern parallel. This situation resembles moments where you trace a problem back to its source. For example, realizing that certain beliefs came from teachings that sounded right, but were misleading. Identifying how a small compromise led to larger patterns over time. Recognizing how one distorted idea affected multiple areas of your life. At this stage, you begin to see this didn't start randomly. It came through influence. And you understand why it must be addressed fully. Because if the source of influence remains, the pattern can return. So transformation deepens when you identify the origin, understand the pathway, remove the influence completely. And that is what this verse reveals. Misalignment has a source, and true alignment requires addressing it at that level. Next verse. Now therefore, kill every male among the little ones, and kill every woman who has known man intimately. Now therefore, represents conclusion or necessary next step. Kill represents remove or bring to an end. Male among the little ones, early stage seeds of patterns, immature but capable of growth. Little ones, undeveloped awareness or beginning stages of thoughts. Woman who has known man, expressions already shaped by interaction with established patterns. Known intimately, fully engaged, or experienced or reinforced. This is where the process becomes very precise and uncompromising. We are no longer just dealing with mature patterns or obvious structures. Now, we are dealing with early stage formation, male among the little ones. This represents young seeds of patterns, not fully grown, but capable of becoming something later. This shows something powerful. Transformation is not just about removing what is already visible. It is about addressing what is still forming. Because if left unchecked, it will grow into the same pattern again. Then woman who has known man. As we've established, woman represents expression. Man represents source or seed. So this refers to expressions that have already been shaped and reinforced. These are patterns you have practiced, behaviors you have repeated, ways of thinking that have been lived out. These are no longer neutral, they are established. So, they must also be removed. This is not cruelty, this is complete disentanglement. Nothing is left at the root, in development, or in expression, because leaving any layer behind allows the cycle to restart. Modern parallel. This situation resembles moment where someone becomes deeply aware and begins addressing even the smallest patterns. For example, not just stopping a behavior, but catching the thoughts before it forms. Not just breaking a cycle, but noticing early triggers and stopping them immediately. Not just changing actions, but examining subtle tendencies before they grow. You begin to see it's not enough to deal with what is obvious. You must also address what is forming beneath the surface. Because true transformation happens when the root is removed, when the expression is cleared, and even the early seeds are addressed. So nothing remains that can recreate the same cycle. And that is what this verse represents: complete layered transformation down to the earlier stages of formation. Next verse, Numbers 31, verse 18. But all the young girls who have not known man intimately, keep alive for yourselves. Young girls here represents undeveloped expressions, pure, unformed aspects of awareness, Not known man means not yet influenced by established patterns. Keep alive means preserve or protect or allow to develop. For yourselves means to be integrated into aligned identity. Now we see something powerful. Not everything is removed. Some things are preserved. The young girls who have not known man represent aspects of your awareness, expressions within you, potentials and tendencies that have not yet been shaped by misalignment. They are unformed, open, and receptive, not corrupted, but still neutral and pure in potential. And instead of being removed, they are kept alive. This shows something important. Transformation is not destruction of everything. It is discernment. Knowing what must be removed and what must be preserved and nurtured. These young girls represent new ways of thinking, fresh perspectives, unconditioned awareness that can now be developed in alignment. Keep alive for yourselves means bring these into your identity, nurture them, allow them to grow under truth, awareness, and alignment. So instead of being shaped by distortion, they are shaped by clarity. Modern parallel. This situation resembles moments where, after letting go of old patterns, you begin to recognize new possibilities within yourself. For example, discovering new ways of thinking that are not rooted in fear. Developing new habits that were not influenced by past conditioning. Noticing parts of yourself that feel fresh, open, and unburdened. Instead of rejecting everything, you begin to discern what is healthy and worth nurturing. You protect these new aspects. You give them space to grow because you understand not everything within you needs to be removed. Some things need to be preserved and developed in alignment. And that is what this verse represents. The protection of unformed, pure potential so it can grow in truth. Next verse. And as for you, remain outside the camp 7 days. Whoever has killed any person and whoever has touched any slain, purify yourselves and your captives on the 3rd day and on the 7th day. Remain outside the camp means stay in a space of reflection or purification before integration. 7 days represents complete cycle or full process of transformation. Killed or touched the slain represents engaged in deep confrontation or removal of patterns. Purify yourselves represents cleanse perception or realign internally. Captives represents thoughts and patterns brought under control. What does Paul say? Bringing every thought into captivity to the obedience of Christ. So captives here represents thoughts and patterns brought under control. Third day represents initial awakening or shift in awareness. Now we see something very important. Even after the work is done, there is still a process. Remain outside the camp 7 days. This means don't rush back into normalcy. After deep transformation, your awareness has shifted. Your patterns have been confronted. Your structures have been dismantled. But integration takes time. 7 days represents a complete cycle. This is not instant. It is a process where everything settles. Everything is examined. Everything is realigned fully. And then we see, purify yourselves and your captives. This is key. Not only do you need purification, but even what you have captured, your thoughts, patterns, and reclaimed parts must also be refined and aligned. Because everything is still adjusting to the new state. Then we see the 3rd day and the 7th day. 3rd day represents awakening, realization, initial clarity. 7th day represents completion, rest, full integration. So the process looks like this. Awareness, 3rd day. Integration, 7th day. This shows transformation is both immediate and progressive. You can see clearly in a moment, but full alignment unfolds over time. Modern parallel. This situation resembles moments where after a major breakthrough, you need time to process and stabilize. For example, after leaving a belief system, taking time to rebuild your understanding. After ending a toxic cycle, allowing yourself space to reset mentally and emotionally. After deep realization, giving yourself time to integrate what you've learned. You don't rush back. You don't pretend everything is instantly settled. Instead, you allow the process. Because you understand transformation has stages. And real change happens when you allow awareness, allow processing, allow full integration. And that is what this verse represents. The necessity of time and process for true purification and alignment. Next verse, Numbers 31 verse 20. And purify every garment, every article of leather, everything made of goat's hair, and every article of wood. Purify is cleanse or refine or bring into alignment. Garment represents identity, what you wear, which is how you present yourself. Leather represents process external layer or protective adaptations. Goat's hair represents natural tendencies or raw traits shaped into form. Wood represents foundational structures or frameworks or belief systems. Every article represents nothing excluded, total refinement. Now the focus shifts to what has been formed and used. After the confrontation, after the purification process began, everything that remains must now be examined. Not just thoughts or patterns, but also structures and expressions. Garments represent identity. How you see yourself, present yourself, function outwardly. Even this must be purified, because identity can still carry old labels, old definitions, and subtle remnants of misalignment. Then leather. This represents adaptations, protective layers you developed over time, ways you learn to cope, survive, and navigate. These are not inherently wrong, but they must be refined. Then goat's hair. This connects to natural tendencies, raw traits that have been shaped into behavior. Even what feels natural must be examined, because not everything natural is aligned. And finally, wood. This represents foundational structures, belief systems, frameworks you've built your life on. Even these must be tested and refined. So this verse shows transformation goes beyond the internal. It reaches identity, behaviors, adaptations, foundational beliefs, and nothing is exempt. Modern parallel. This situation resembles moments where someone begins to examine not just their thoughts, but everything they've built around those thoughts. For example, redefining identity after letting go of old labels. Re-evaluating coping mechanisms that were developed in difficult seasons. Questioning habits that feel natural but may not align with truth. Examining foundational beliefs that shaped your decisions. You begin to realize transformation is not selective, it is comprehensive. Because true alignment requires that everything you carry, everything you wear, and everything you've built is brought into clarity, truth, and alignment. And that is what this verse represents. Total refinement of everything that remains after transformation begins. Next verse. Then Eleazar the priest said to the men of war who had gone to the battle, "This is the ordinance of the law which the Lord commanded Moses." Eleazar the priest represents discernment or spiritual understanding. Sed is instruction or clarification. Men of war represents those who have engaged in inner confrontation. Ordinance represents established principle or consistent law of alignment. Law is structure of truth or how alignment operates. Commanded is revealed or made known through awareness. Moses. Now we move from action and purification into understanding the process. Eleazar the priest said, this shows discernment begins to explain what just happened. After the battle, after the confrontation, there is a need for interpretation and clarity. Because transformation is not just something you go through. It is something you must understand. Men of war represents those who have done the work. Those who have confronted patterns, challenged beliefs, engaged in transformation. Now they are being taught how this process works. This is the ordinance of the law. This means this is not random. This is a consistent principle. A pattern that governs purification, alignment, and transformation. So, what we've been seeing in Numbers 31 is not a one-time event. It is a universal process. How misalignment is addressed, patterns are removed, and alignment is restored. And it is commanded through Moses, meaning it comes through awareness. You don't invent this process, you discover it. As awareness increases, you begin to see this is how transformation works. Modern parallel. This situation resembles moments where, after going through a deep experience, you begin to understand the principles behind it. For example, realizing there is a pattern to how you grow and transform. Understanding that healing follows certain stages. Recognizing that clarity, confrontation, and integration are part of a process. You move from just experiencing change to understanding change. And that understanding gives you confidence, stability, and consistency. Because now you know this is not random. There is a structure. There is a process. There is a law to it. And that is what this verse represents. The revelation that transformation follows a consistent, understandable pattern. Next verse. Only the gold, the silver, the bronze, the iron, the tin, and the lead. Symbolic breakdown. Gold represents refined truth, highest value, divine nature. Silver represents redemption, or clarity or reflective understanding. Bronze represents judgment or discernment or evaluation. Iron represents strength or structure or resilience. Tin represents adaptability or flexibility in form. Lead represents weight or density or what carries heaviness. Only is distinction or what remains after testing. Now we see something very important. Not everything is treated the same. Some things must be burned away completely, but others can pass through the fire. These metals represent what has substance. Things within you that are strong, valuable, and capable of being refined, not destroyed, but purified. Gold, silver, bronze, iron, these are materials that endure fire. They don't disappear. They become refined. This shows a powerful truth. Transformation does not remove everything. It reveals what is real and what can remain. Even lead, which represents heaviness, is still listed. Meaning, even the heavier aspect of your experience can be processed and refined. So this verse introduces discernment in purification. Not everything is rejected or destroyed. Some things are tested and transformed. Modern parallel. This situation resembles moments where you realize that not everything in your life needs to be discarded. For example, certain traits that just need refinement, not removal. Experiences that felt heavy but shaped your strength. Parts of your identity that become clearer and stronger through challenge. You begin to see some things in you are worth keeping. Not as they were, but refined. Because fire does not always mean loss. Sometimes it means clarification of value, where what remains is stronger, clearer, and more aligned. And that is what this verse represents. The distinction between what must be removed and what can be refined. Next verse. Everything that can endure fire, you shall pass through the fire. It shall also be purified with the water of purification. And whatever cannot endure fire, you shall pass through the water. Symbolic breakdown. Fire represents truth or testing or refinement. Water represents cleansing or renewal or restoration. Endure fire, what can withstand deep truth? Word, the cleansing agent or truth expressed and understood. Salted with fire, preserved and refined through testing. Tested by fire, evaluation of what is real and lasting. Now we see that this is not isolated to numbers. It is a consistent law across scripture. Jesus said, everyone shall be salted with fire. Meaning, everyone undergoes refinement through truth. Fire here is not destruction. It is preservation through purification. Just as salt preserves, fire refines and stabilizes. Then Paul says, every man's work shall be tested by fire, which confirms everything we build, beliefs, identity, understanding, will be examined by truth. What is real, aligned, grounded remains. What is false, unstable, built on distortion cannot endure. This is what Revelation calls those whose name are not found in the book of life are thrown into the lake of fire. Not people. Not people. But what is false, unstable, and built on distortion? And then we see the other side, cleansed by the washing of the word. This connects directly to water purification. The word represents truth understood, clarity received, awareness applied. So while fire tests, exposes, refines, water cleanses, renews, restores, together they form a complete process, the lake of fire. This is why Numbers says, pass through fire and also through water. Because transformation requires both truth and renewal. Lake of fire, not torture. Complete renewal. Modern parallel. This situation resembles moments where your beliefs and understanding are both challenged and renewed. For example, experiencing a deep realization that dismantles what you once believed, fire. Then rebuilding your understanding with clarity and peace, water. Or having your mindset tested through life experiences. Then gaining new perspective that restores and stabilizes you. You begin to see growth is not just about being challenged. It is also about being renewed. Because true transformation is not complete until what is false is removed and what is true is established. So this verse, along with Jesus and Paul, reveals a universal process where every person undergoes testing, fire, and renewal, water, until alignment is complete. So as we've seen, fire represents truth or testing or refinement. Water represents cleansing or renewal or restoration. Lake represents fullness or totality or immersion. Lake of fire is complete, immersive purification through truth and renewal. Now everything comes together. In Numbers, we see fire and water working together. Fire tests and refines. Water cleanses and restores. Then in later scripture, this imagery is combined into one phase, the lake of fire. This is not random, it is a fusion of both processes. A lake represents full immersion, not partial, not surface level, complete. So the lake of fire becomes total immersion in purification, where truth, fire, is fully active and cleansing, water, is fully present. Nothing is hidden. Nothing escapes. Everything is exposed, refined, and cleansed. This is why it is described in such strong imagery, because it represents complete transformation. Not punishment, but full purification. The same pattern we've seen: cities burned, fire; garments washed, water. Now combined into one, a lake of fire, meaning a state where the entire being undergoes truth, exposure, and renewal until nothing misaligned remains. This situation resembles moments where transformation is so deep that it feels like your entire perspective is being reshaped at once. For example, going through a complete shift in how you see yourself and life. Having old beliefs fully dismantled while new understanding emerges. Feeling like everything is being reworked internally. It's not partial, it's immersive. You are not just learning something new. You are being transformed at every level. And that is what the lake of fire represents. Complete immersion in truth and renewal until alignment is fully restored. Next verse, Numbers 31 verse 24. And you shall wash your clothes on the seventh day and be clean, and afterward you may come into the camp. Wash your clothes means cleanse identity or renew how you present yourself. Clothes, garments, represents identity or outward expression. Seventh day represents completion or fullness or rest. Be clean means fully aligned or purified. Afterward means sequence or process completed. Come into the camp, re-enter alignment or integration into your new state. Now we see the completion of the process. After confrontation, war, removal, cutting off patterns, purification, fire and water, comes final cleansing. Wash your clothes. This points to identity being fully renewed. Not just thoughts or patterns, but how you now see yourself, express yourself, and live outwardly. Even your garment must reflect alignment. And then on the seventh day, this represents completion. The full cycle has now unfolded, settled, integrated. Nothing rushed, nothing partial, Everything has gone through the process. And the result is be clean, which means no residue, no hidden misalignment, no internal conflict. Then comes the final step. Afterward, come into the camp. This is powerful because earlier you were outside the camp, evaluation or purification. Now you re-enter, but not as you were before. You return renewed, aligned, integrated. This is restoration into alignment. Modern parallel. This situation resembles moments where after deep transformation, you feel ready to fully step back into life, but differently. For example, returning to environment with a new mindset and clarity. Expressing yourself in ways that reflect your growth. Feeling internally settled, no longer conflicted. You are no longer reacting from old patterns. No longer carrying unresolved tension. Instead, you are clear. You are grounded. You are aligned. Because the process is complete. And now you can live from that alignment. Not just internally, but outwardly. And that is what this verse represents. The completion of transformation and the return to life in a fully aligned state. Numbers 31 verse 25 to 27. The Lord spoke to Moses saying, count the plunder that was taken, you and Eleazar the priest and the chief fathers of the congregation, and divide the plunder into 2 parts, between those who took part in the war and all the congregation. Symbolic breakdown. Lord spoke is inner knowing or divine awareness. Count is bring into full awareness or take inventory. Plunder, reclaimed energy, habits, insight, resources. Moses, the conscious awareness. Eleazar, discernment. Chief fathers, governing wisdom or matured understanding. Divide, intentional distribution or order. Those who went to war, active effort or engaged transformation. Congregation, the entire being, all aspects of self. Now that the battle is complete, purification has happened. Integration has taken place. The next step is order and accountability. Count the plunder. This means become aware of what you've gained. Transformation is not just about what you lost. It is also about what you have recovered. You now take inventory of your energy, your clarity, your understanding, your strength. Nothing is ignored. Everything is recognized. And who is involved? Moses, awareness. Eleazar, discernment. Leaders, wisdom. This shows full conscious engagement. Then the plunder is divided. This is powerful because it shows balance between the part of you that actively did the work, went to war, and your whole being, the congregation. Meaning, transformation benefits your entire life. Not just the part of you that struggled, not just the part that fought, but everything within you. This creates harmony, balance, and distribution of growth. Modern parallel. This situation resembles moments where, after going through a major transformation, you begin to recognize and apply what you've gained. For example, realizing you've gained clarity, strength, and wisdom through a difficult process. Applying what you've learned across different areas of your life. Allowing your growth to impact your relationships, decisions, and direction. You don't just move on. You acknowledge and integrate what you've gained. Because transformation is not just about overcoming something. It is about becoming something new and allowing that newness to flow into every part of your life. So this moment represents awareness, order, and the balanced integration of everything gained through transformation. Next verse, Numbers 31, verse 28 to 29. From the persons, the cattle, the donkeys, and the sheep. Israel represents those in alignment after wrestling with truth. Sheep represents receptive awareness, ability to hear truth. Lost sheep represents awareness that has wandered into misalignment. Found or restored, brought back into alignment. Offering, bringing all aspects back to source. Now, this makes Jesus' words very clear. I came for the lost sheep of Israel. This is not about exclusion. It is about restoration. If Israel represents those who walk in alignment, then the lost sheep represent aspects of awareness that were once aligned but wandered, not destroyed, not rejected, just misdirected. So Jesus' mission becomes clear, not to create something new, but to restore what was already meant to be aligned. The sheep already belong. They just lost direction, followed the wrong voice, became influenced by misalignment. So the work is bringing them back. This is the same pattern we've been seeing: confrontation, war; separation, living; purification, fire and water; integration, gathering; now restoration, where what was lost is found again and brought back into alignment. Modern parallel. This situation resembles moments where you realize you didn't lose yourself. You just lost direction. For example, feeling disconnected from clarity, but later rediscovering it. Realizing you were influenced by fear or conditioning, not truth. Returning to a deeper sense of peace, identity, and understanding. you begin to see nothing was truly lost. It just needed to be realigned. And when truth becomes clear again, something within you recognizes it, like sheep recognizing a voice. You return, not because you were forced, but because it resonates. And that is what Jesus is pointing to: the restoration of awareness, the return to alignment, the gathering of what was once scattered. So the lost sheep of Israel are those who are meant for alignment being brought back into it. Numbers 31 verse 30. And from the children of Israel's half, you shall take one of every 50, drawn from the persons, the cattle, the donkeys, and the flocks, and give them to the Levites who keep charge of the tabernacle of the Lord. Children of Israel represents the whole aligned being. Half, what belongs to the collective self. 1 of 50, a measured portion or structured giving. Persons, cattle, donkeys, flocks, all layers of inner life. Levites, those set apart for service or functions that maintain alignment. Tabernacle, dwelling place of awareness or inner sacred space. Keep charge, maintain, or guard or sustain alignment. Now we see something very important. Alignment must be sustained, not just achieved. The first portion, the earlier verse, came from those who actively engaged in transformation. Now this portion comes from the whole being. This shows everyone benefits and everyone contributes. And who receives this portion? The Levites. The Levites represent what is set apart to maintain alignment. Within you, this looks like disciplines, practices, habits that keep you grounded, ongoing awareness and reflection. They keep charge of the tabernacle. The tabernacle represents your inner dwelling place, your consciousness, your awareness, your connection to truth. So this verse shows transformation is not just a one-time event. It requires ongoing stewardship. You must continually invest into what keeps you aligned, support what maintains clarity, nourish what sustains your awareness. Modern parallel. This situation resembles moments where you realize growth must be maintained intentionally. For example, continuing practices that keep your mind clear, reflection, steady, stillness, maintaining boundaries that protect your peace, investing time and energy into habits that support your alignment. You don't just grow and stop. You maintain and sustain. Because without maintenance, old patterns can return. So you intentionally give time, give attention, give energy to what keeps you grounded. And that is what this verse represents. The ongoing investment required to sustain alignment and awareness. Numbers 31 verse 31. So Moses and Eleazar the priest did as the Lord commanded Moses. Moses, conscious awareness. Eleazar the priest, discernment or spiritual understanding. Did, action or embodiment. Commanded, revealed truth or inner knowing. Word, truth or understanding. Became flesh, truth expressed in lived reality. This is where everything reaches fulfillment. So they did, not discussed, not debated, not postponed, done. This is the same pattern we see in the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. The Word represents truth, understanding, inner revelation. But truth is not complete when it is only heard, studied, or understood. It becomes complete when it is embodied. When what you know, what you discern, what you believe becomes how you live. This is what we see here. Moses, awareness. Eleazar, discernment, now moving into action. So the word is no longer abstract or theoretical. It is now flesh, meaning, visible, lived, expressed, and it dwells among you, meaning it becomes your reality. Your daily life becomes the expression of truth. So John is not telling you Jesus is God who became a man. John is telling you Jesus embodied the word. The word was lived. The word was seen in Jesus. So now we don't see any contradiction, because Jesus consistently said what? The Father is greater than I. The Father in me does the works. I can of myself do nothing. So Jesus never said I am God. Never. So now we don't see any contradiction. Modern parallel. This situation resembles moments where something you've learned becomes part of who you are. For example, not just understanding peace, but living peacefully. Not just knowing truth, but making decisions based on it. Not just learning about alignment, but embodying it daily. You are no longer collecting knowledge, you are becoming it. And people can see it in how you speak, in how you respond, in how you live. Because truth has moved from your mind into your life. And that is what this verse represents. The embodiment of truth, where the word becomes lived reality, just as seen in Jesus. Next verse. The booty remaining from the plunder, which the men of war had taken, was 675,000 sheep. Booty remaining, what remains after purification. Plunder, what was reclaimed from misalignment. Sheep, receptive awareness, ability to hear and follow truth. 675,000, abundance, fullness, multiplied capacity. Now we begin to see the result of the entire process. After confrontation, removal, purification, integration, alignment, something remains. and what remains is abundant. 675,000 sheep. This is not about a literal count. It represents multiplied capacity for alignment. Sheep, as we established, represent the ability to hear truth, receptivity to guidance, alignment with what is real. So after the process, your ability to discern, hear, respond to truth is not just restored, it is increased. What once was scattered, misdirected, influenced, is now gathered and multiplied. This is powerful because it shows nothing is lost in transformation. What is aligned is preserved and increased. Modern parallel. This situation resembles moments where, after going through deep transformation, you realize you've gained more than you lost. For example, becoming more sensitive to truth and clarity, developing stronger discernment than before, feeling more grounded, aware, and responsive in your daily life. You begin to see the process didn't take from you, it gave to you. Because what remains after truth does its work. It's not less, it is greater. And that is what this verse represents. The abundance that comes from alignment, where your capacity to hear and live truth is multiplied. Numbers 31 verse 33. 72,000 cattle. Cattle here is the conditioned self, learned behaviors, structured habits. 72,000 organized fullness or structured completeness. Remaining, what has been preserved after purification. Now we move from sheep, receptivity, into cattle, conditioning. As we established earlier, beasts represents the raw nature. Cattle, what has been trained and shaped. So this verse is showing your conditioned self remains, but now it is refined and aligned. 72,000, again, not just a number, but a symbol of structure, organization, and completeness. This means your habits, routines, and learned behaviors are no longer driven by fear, shaped by distortion, operating unconsciously. Instead, they are intentional, aligned, and structured in truth. This is powerful because it shows transformation does not remove your structure. It reorders it. So what was once conditioned by misalignment is now conditioned by truth. Modern parallel. This situation resembles moments where your habits and routines begin to reflect your growth. For example, developing disciplined patterns that support your peace and clarity. Replacing old habits with intentional aligned behaviors. Noticing that your daily life starts to reflect your inner transformation. You are no longer acting on autopilot, repeating unconscious patterns. Instead, your structure becomes supportive, aligned, intentional, because true transformation shows up not just in what you think, but in how you live daily. And that is what this verse represents. The refinement of your conditioned self, where your habits and structures now align with truth. Numbers 31 verse 34, 61,000 donkeys. Donkeys represent conscience or inner burden bearer or sense of right and wrong. 61,000 represents structured magnitude or stabilized awareness, remaining what has been preserved and refined. Now, we move from sheep, receptivity to truth, cattle, conditioned habits, into donkeys, conscience. The donkey is a burden bearer. It carries weight. Symbolically, this represents your inner sense of right and wrong, your moral awareness, the part of you that carries conviction. But here's the key. Before transformation, conscience can be shaped by fear, conditioned by external teachings, burdened by guilt or confusion. But now, after the process, it is refined. 61,000. Again, this reflects stability and structure, meaning your conscience is no longer reactive, inconsistent, externally controlled. Instead, it becomes clear, grounded, aligned with truth. You no longer feel unnecessary guilt, confusion about what is right, pressure from distorted standards, because your conscience has been recalibrated. Modern parallel. This situation resembles moments where your inner sense of right and wrong becomes clearer and more stable. For example, no longer feeling guilty for things rooted in fear-based teachings. Having a clearer sense of what aligns with your values. Trusting your inner conviction instead of external pressure. You begin to notice your conscience feels lighter, but also more accurate, because it is no longer burdened by distortion. It is now aligned with truth. And that is what this verse represents. The restoration of conscience, where your inner compass becomes clear, stable, and aligned. Next verse, and 32,000 persons in all of the women who had not known man intimately. Persons, aspects of identity or awareness. Women, expressions or potential manifestations. Not known man means not shaped by established patterns. 32,000, structured fullness or preserved potential, remaining what has been kept after purification. Now we return to something we saw earlier, but with deeper clarity. These are the preserved aspects of awareness. Women who had not known man. So we established woman represents expression. Man represents seed or established pattern. So this refers to expressions that have not been shaped by misalignment. They are unconditioned, unformed, open to development. And now we see they remain in abundance. 32,000. This reflects structured, preserved potential, This is powerful because it shows transformation does not leave you empty. It leaves you with pure ground to build from. These are the parts of you that are free from distortion, not influenced by past conditioning, ready to be shaped by truth. This is new creation potential, not something foreign, but something that was always there, just protected, preserved, waiting to be aligned. Modern parallel. This situation resembles moments where, after letting go of old patterns, you begin to notice new possibilities within yourself. For example, discovering new ways of thinking that feel fresh and unburdened. Realizing you are no longer limited by past conditioning. Feeling open to growth without the weight of old influences. You begin to see you are not starting from scratch. You are starting from clarity. From a place where your potential is no longer distorted, where your expression is no longer conditioned. And now you can build intentionally because what remains is pure and shaped awareness ready for alignment. And that is what this verse represents: the preservation of pure potential after complete transformation. Next verse. And the half, the portion for those who had gone out to war, was in number 337,500 sheep. Half, balance or division for order. Portion, assigned share or intentional allocation. Those who went to war, active engagement in transformation. Sheep, receptive awareness, ability to hear and follow truth. 337,500, structured abundance or ordered fullness. Now we see something very important. What is gained is not random, it is structured. The half for those who went to war. This shows those who actively engaged in transformation received a measured portion. This is not favoritism. It is alignment with effort and participation. Because transformation requires engagement, intention, willingness to confront. And the result is capacity increases. The sheep represents your ability to hear truth, your receptivity, your alignment. So this verse shows those who engage deeply experience greater clarity and responsiveness. Not because others are excluded, but because participation shapes capacity. And yet it is half, meaning balance is maintained. Growth is not isolated to one part of you, it is distributed. Modern parallel. This situation resembles moments where the effort you put into your growth directly affects your level of clarity. For example, the more you reflect, the more clearly you begin to see. The more you engage with truth, the more receptive you become. The more intentional you are, the more aligned your responses are. You begin to notice growth responds to engagement, not randomly, but proportionally. And yet, it remains balanced across your life. Because true transformation is not about imbalance. It is about structured growth, where what you gain is intentional, measured, and aligned. And that is what this verse represents: the ordered distribution of increased capacity based on engagement in transformation. Next verse, Numbers 31, verse 37. And the Lord's tribute of the sheep was 675. Lord's tribute, portion dedicated to source or alignment with truth. Sheep, receptive awareness or ability to hear truth. 675, measured offering, intentional portion set apart. Now we see something very important. Not all that is gained is kept for self. A portion is set apart. The Lord's tribute. This represents dedication back to the source. From everything you've gained, clarity, receptivity, ability to hear truth, a portion is lifted up. Not because it is taken away, but because it is aligned intentionally. This shows growth is not just personal accumulation. It includes recognition and alignment. Even your ability to hear, discern, and respond to truth must remain connected to the source of that truth. Otherwise, it can become self-centered, distorted again. So this tribute represents staying grounded, acknowledging where your clarity comes from. Modern parallel. This situation resembles moments where you remain intentional about staying grounded even as you grow. For example, staying humble as your understanding increases. Continuing to reflect and align instead of becoming self-reliant in a distorted way. Dedicating time to maintain clarity instead of assuming you've arrived. You begin to see growth requires connection, not just expansion, because without alignment to source, clarity can drift. So you intentionally stay grounded, stay aware, stay aligned. And that is what this verse represents. The portion of your awareness that remains consciously aligned with truth, ensuring continued clarity and balance. Next verse, Numbers 31, verse 38. And the cattle were 36,000, of which the Lord's tribute was 72. Cattle represents the conditioned self, learned behaviors, structured habits. 36,000 represents organized fullness or structured development. Lord's tribute, portion set apart for alignment. 72, refined structure or disciplined order. Now we return to cattle, the conditioned self, your habits, routines, learned behaviors, structured ways of thinking. After transformation, these are not removed, they are reordered. 36,000, this reflects organized structure, meaning your conditioning is no longer chaotic, reactive, shaped by fear. Instead, it becomes intentional, aligned, structured in truth. And then a portion is set apart. The Lord's tribute was 72. This shows even your habits must remain connected to alignment. Not just your thoughts or awareness, but also how you live daily. This is powerful because it shows alignment is not just internal, it is practical. Your routines, your structure, your daily life must reflect truth. And a portion of that is always consciously maintained, so your habits don't drift back into unconscious patterns or misalignment. That's what Jesus meant by let your light shine before men, that they may see your good works and glorify your Father who is in heaven. You must reflect truth. Modern parallel. This situation resembles moments where your daily habits begin to reflect your growth. For example, creating routines that support your clarity and peace. Being intentional about how you spend your time and energy. Maintaining discipline in areas that once felt chaotic. You begin to see your life becomes structured differently, not forced, but aligned. And you remain aware that even your routines must stay connected to truth, because habits can either reinforce alignment or slowly pull you back into misalignment. So you intentionally refine them, maintain them, align them. And that is what this verse represents: the transformation of your conditioned self into structured, aligned living. Next verse. And the donkeys were 30,500, of which the Lord's tribute was 61. Donkeys represent conscience, inner burden bearer, moral awareness. 30,500, stabilized structure, balanced awareness. Lord's tribute, portion set apart for alignment. 61, refined measure or intentional calibration. Now we return to donkeys, the conscience. As we established, the donkey carries weight. It represents your inner sense of right and wrong, your ability to feel conviction. Before transformation, conscience can be burdened by fear, shaped by external rules, weighed down by guilt or confusion. But now it is refined. 30,500, this reflects stabilization. Your conscience is no longer unstable, inconsistent, reactive. It becomes balanced and grounded. And then a portion is set apart. The Lord's tribute was 61. This shows even your conscience must remain aligned with truth, not fear-based, not culturally conditioned, not externally imposed, but calibrated by clarity. So your conscience becomes lighter, clearer, more accurate. You no longer carry unnecessary guilt, false burdens, but you do carry true awareness, the kind that gently corrects, clearly guides, aligns without condemning. Modern parallel. This situation resembles moments where your inner sense of right and wrong becomes clearer and less heavy. For example, no longer feeling guilty for things rooted in fear-based teachings. Having a clearer, calmer sense of what aligns with your values. Trusting your inner conviction without confusion or pressure. You begin to notice your conscience feels more peaceful, steady, reliable, because it is no longer shaped by distortion. It is now aligned with truth. And that is what this verse represents: the restoration and calibration of conscience, clear, balanced, and aligned. Next verse, Numbers 31, verse 40. And the persons were 16,000, of which the Lord's tribute was 32 persons. Persons represent aspects of identity or awareness. Women not known man, unformed pure expressions. 16,000, structured completeness, preserved potential. Lord's tribute, portion set apart for alignment. 32, intentional dedication or refined measure. Now we come back to persons, pure and formed awareness. These are the aspects of you that were not shaped by misalignment, remain untouched by distortion, carry pure potential. 16,000. This reflects structured preservation, meaning even after everything that was removed, there is still substantial intact potential. You are not emptied. You are refined and preserved. And then a portion is set apart. The Lord's tribute was 32. This shows even your pure awareness must remain aligned with truth. Because even potential must be guided, nurtured, directed. Otherwise, it can be shaped incorrectly. So this tribute represents intentional cultivation, where your new awareness, fresh perspective, and conditioned potential is not left unattended, but brought into alignment from the beginning. Modern parallel. This situation resembles moments where you recognize new parts of yourself that are free from past conditioning. For example, new ways of thinking that feel fresh and clear. New perspectives that are not influenced by fear or past experiences. New possibilities for who you can become. You begin to notice you are not starting over from nothing. You are starting from clarity and potential. And you become intentional about how you develop these new paths, what influences you allow, how you shape your future identity. Because you understand what is unformed can be shaped. So you choose to shape it with truth. And that is what this verse represents. The preservation and intentional development of pure awareness aligned from the beginning. Next verse. And Moses gave the tribute, which was the Lord's heave offering, to Eleazar the priest, as the Lord commanded Moses. Moses represents conscious awareness. Gave is released or entrusted. Tribute, portion set apart for alignment. Heave offering, lifted up or elevated into higher purpose. Eleazar the priest, discernment or spiritual understanding. Commanded, alignment with revealed truth. Now we see something very important. Alignment is entrusted to discernment. Moses gave the tribute. This shows awareness does not hold everything for itself. What has been recognized, set apart, aligned, is now entrusted to Eleazar the priest, which represents discernment. This is powerful because it shows awareness alone is not enough. What you know must be handed over to discernment to be maintained. The heave offering means it is lifted up, not just understood, but elevated into purpose. So now, your clarity, your growth, your alignment is not just something you have. It becomes something that is sustained through discernment. And again, we see as the Lord commanded, meaning this is the correct order. Awareness recognizes, discernment maintains. Modern parallel. This situation resembles moments where you not only gain clarity, but begin to live with ongoing discernment. For example, not just understanding truth, but consistently applying it in decisions. Not just realizing something once, but maintaining that awareness daily. Allowing your growth to be guided, not just remembered. You begin to see it's not enough to have truth. You must steward it through discernment, awareness, intentional living. Because without stewardship, even clarity can fade. So you begin to guard what you've gained, apply what you've learned, remain aligned intentionally. And that is what this verse represents. The transfer of alignment into ongoing discernment so it can be sustained and lived. Next verse, Numbers 31, verse 42. And from the children of Israel's half, which Moses separated from the men who fought. Children of Israel, the whole aligned being, half balanced distribution. Moses separated, conscious awareness, organizing and distinguishing. Men who fought, the part of you that actively engaged in transformation. Now we return to something important. Balance. Earlier, we saw one portion for those who fought, which is active engagement. Now we see the other half, belonging to the entire being. This shows transformation is not limited to the part of you that struggled. Even though some parts of you did the work, some parts of you confronted the patterns, the result benefits all of you. Moses separated. This means awareness brings clarity and order. It distinguishes between effort and integration. But it does not divide in a way that creates imbalance. Instead, it ensures proper distribution. Because true transformation is not isolated, it is holistic. Every part of your life, thoughts, habits, identity, relationships begin to reflect the change. Modern parallel. This situation resembles moments where growth in one area of your life begins to impact everything else. For example, improving your mindset and noticing it affects your relationships. Gaining clarity and seeing it influence your decisions, habits, and direction. Healing in one area and experiencing peace in others. You begin to see transformation spreads. It is not confined. Because when one part of you changes deeply, the whole of you is affected. And that is what this verse represents. The balanced integration of transformation across your entire being. Next verse. Now the half belonging to the congregation was 337,500 sheep. Congregation, the whole inner being or the collective self. Half balanced share or equal distribution. Sheep, receptive awareness, the ability to hear truth. 337,500 structured abundance or complete capacity. Now the focus shifts fully to the whole being, the congregation. What we saw earlier for those who fought is now mirrored for the entire self. This shows alignment is not partial. Even though transformation required effort, certain parts of you engage deeply. The result is shared across all of you. The sheep again represents your ability to hear, your receptivity to truth, your alignment with what is real. And now we see the same abundance exist in the whole, meaning your entire being becomes more receptive, aware, and aligned. Not just the part of you that studied, questioned, confronted, but your emotions, your habits, your daily life all begin to reflect this clarity. Modern parallel. This situation resembles moments where your growth becomes visible across every area of your life. For example, your clarity affects how you think, feel, and respond. Your alignment shows up in your relationships and decisions. Your ability to discern truth becomes consistent, not situational. You are no longer clear in one area and confused in another. Instead, your whole being becomes more receptive, more aligned, more grounded, because transformation has moved from a part of you into all of you. And that is what this verse represents: the full distribution of alignment, where your entire being shares in the clarity and receptivity gained through transformation. Next verse, 36,000 cattle. Cattle again represent the conditioned self or learned behaviors or habits. 36,000, structured order or organized completeness, belonging to the congregation, integrated across the whole being. Now we return again to cattle, your conditioned self. But this time, it is not just the part that engaged in transformation. It is now your entire being. This shows transformation has reached your habits, your routines, patterns, learned behaviors are no longer divided, inconsistent, partially aligned. Instead, they are now unified, structured, aligned across your whole life. 36,000, again reflecting organized completeness, meaning your conditioning has been reordered at every level. Not just when you are intentional, but also in your daily flow, in your unconscious patterns, in your natural responses. Modern parallel. This situation resembles moments where your habits begin to reflect your growth consistently. For example, acting in alignment, even when you are not consciously trying. Your routines naturally supporting your clarity and peace. No longer switching between old and new patterns. You begin to notice alignment becomes your default, not something you have to force, but something that flows. Because your conditioned self has been retrained, and now it supports your alignment instead of working against it. And that is what this verse represents: the full integration of aligned habits, where your entire life structure reflects truth. Next verse, 30,500 donkeys. Donkeys represents conscience, inner burden bearer, moral awareness. 30,500, stabilized structure, balanced awareness, belonging to the congregation, integrated across the entire being. Now we return again to donkeys, the conscience. But now, just like the cattle, this is no longer limited to the part of you that engage in transformation. It is now your entire being. This shows your conscience has been fully recalibrated, not partially, but completely. Before transformation, your conscience may have been shaped by fear, influenced by external teachings, inconsistent depending on environment, but now it is stable, clear, aligned across every area of your life. 30,500 again reflects balance and structure, meaning your inner sense of right, alignment, and truth is no longer reactive or conflicting. It is consistent no matter the situation. Modern parallel. This situation resembles moments where your inner compass becomes reliable across all areas of your life. For example, making decisions with clarity instead of confusion. No longer feeling torn between what feels right and what you were taught. Experiencing a steady, peaceful sense of conviction. You begin to notice your conscience is no longer heavy, but clear. And it doesn't shift based on pressure, environment, external influence, because it is now aligned internally. And that is what this verse represents. The full integration of conscience, clear, steady, and consistent across your entire being. Next verse. And 16,000 persons. Persons again represent aspects of identity or awareness. Women not known man and formed pure expressions. 16,000 structured completeness, preserved potential, belonging to the congregation, fully integrated across the whole being. Now we return to persons, pure and formed awareness. But this time, just like sheep, receptivity, cattle, conditioning, donkeys, conscience, it is now fully integrated across the whole being. This is powerful because it shows your pure potential is no longer isolated. It is now accessible throughout your entire life. 16,000 again reflects structured completeness, meaning the parts of you that were untouched, unconditioned, not shaped by distortion, are now fully present and integrated, not hidden, not dormant, not limited to certain moments, but active across your thoughts, your actions, your identity. Modern parallel. This situation resembles moments where your sense of possibility feels fully present in your life. For example, feeling like you can think and act from a fresh, unconditioned place. No longer being limited by past patterns when making decisions. Experiencing a sense of openness and clarity in all areas of your life. You begin to notice you are no longer operating from old conditioning, past limitations. Instead, your potential is available, active, integrated, because nothing within you is blocked, hidden, or restricted. Everything is now aligned and accessible. And that is what this verse represents. The full integration of pure awareness, where your unconditioned potential is present across your entire being. Next verse, Numbers 31, verse 47. And from the children of Israel's half, Moses took one of every 50 and gave them to the Levites, who kept charge of the tabernacle of the Lord, as the Lord commanded Moses. Symbolic breakdown. Moses, conscious awareness, took one of every 50, intentional portion or structured dedication. Children of Israel, the whole aligned being. Levite, function set apart to maintain alignment. Tabernacle, inner dwelling place or consciousness. Kept charge, guard or sustain or preserve. Commanded, alignment with truth. Now we arrive at something very important. Alignment must be maintained intentionally Even after transformation, purification, integration, there is still stewardship. Moses took one of every 50. This shows a consistent portion is always set apart, dedicated, and maintained. And who receives it? The Levites. The Levites represent what sustains your alignment within you. This includes daily awareness, reflection, discipline, intentional living. They keep charge of the tabernacle, meaning they guard your inner state. They ensure clarity remains. Alignment is sustained. Truth is not forgotten. So this verse shows transformation is not a one-time event. It requires ongoing care. Even after everything has been aligned, you must still maintain, protect, and nurture. Modern parallel. This situation resembles moments where you realize that growth must be sustained intentionally. For example, continuing practices that keep your mind clear, maintaining boundaries that protects your peace, being mindful of what you allow into your thoughts and life. You don't just reach clarity and stop, you maintain it. Because without maintenance, old patterns can return. So you remain intentional about your awareness, your habits, your environment. And that is what this verse represents. The ongoing stewardship required to preserve alignment and clarity within your life. Next verse, Numbers 31:48. Then the officers who were over thousands of the army, the captains of thousands and captains of hundreds came near to Moses. Officers or captains represent governing thoughts or decision-making faculties. Thousands and hundreds, structured levels of influence, came near, approaching awareness, bringing realization forward. Moses, conscious awareness. Now we see a shift from process to recognition. The officers and captains represent the parts of you that make decisions, lead actions, govern direction. These are your higher reasoning, structured thinking, internal leadership. And now they come near to Moses' awareness. This means your governing faculties are now aligned enough to approach awareness, communicate clearly, reflect on what has happened. This is a moment of integration and acknowledgement, where your mind is no longer scattered, resisting, or divided. Instead, it comes into agreement with awareness, ready to report, reflect, recognize. Modern parallel. This situation resembles moments where your thinking becomes clear enough to reflect honestly on your growth. For example, recognizing how your decisions have changed over time. Seeing how your thinking is now more aligned and intentional. Being able to evaluate your life with clarity instead of confusion. You are no longer avoiding awareness, no longer resisting truth. Instead, you move toward it with clarity, honesty, alignment, because your internal leadership has been transformed. And now it is ready to acknowledge what has taken place. And that is what this verse represents. The alignment of your inner leadership coming into awareness with clarity and readiness to reflect. Next verse, not a man of us is missing. not one missing. Complete preservation of what is aligned. Book of life, record of what is aligned with truth or living awareness. Names represent identities, patterns, expressions. Not found written, not aligned, not rooted in truth. Cast into fire, purified or removed through truth. Now, this verse connects directly to the language in Revelation. Those whose names were not found written in the book of life were cast into the fire. When read literally, it can sound like loss or distraction. But in light of everything we've seen, it becomes clear. The book of life represents what is alive in alignment, what is true, real, rooted in life. So when something is not found written, it means it was never aligned to begin with. It was a distortion, a false identity, a misaligned pattern. And what happens? It is cast into the fire, which we've already established means purification through truth. So nothing real is lost. That is why in Numbers we see not one is missing, because what is aligned remains, and what enters the fire is only what cannot stand truth. Modern parallel. This situation resembles moments where you realize that certain parts of your identity were never truly you. For example, beliefs you once held that no longer resonate. Labels or identities shaped by fear or environment. Patterns that felt real but were actually conditioned. When truth comes, those things fall away. Not because you are losing yourself, but because they were never truly you. And what remains is what is real, what is aligned, what is alive. So you begin to see nothing true is ever lost. Only what is false, misaligned, constructed is removed. And that is what both verses are revealing. Fire does not destroy what is real. It reveals and removes what is not. Next verse, Numbers 31, verse 50. Therefore, we have brought an offering for the Lord, what every man found of ornaments of gold, to make atonement for ourselves before the Lord. Therefore, response to realization, brought an offering, intentional gratitude or acknowledgement, gold ornament, refined value, what has been purified through fire. Every man found, personal realization, individual discovery, atonement, reconciliation, or alignment or restoration before the Lord in awareness of truth or source. Now we see the natural response, gratitude. After realizing nothing is missing, they respond with an offering, not out of obligation, but recognition. Gold ornament. Gold represents what has been refined through fire. So this offering is not random. It is what has been purified and proven true. Every man found, this is personal. Each person recognized, discovered, brought forward what was of value, and then to make atonement. This is not about payment. It is about alignment, becoming one. So this offering represents conscious alignment with truth. After everything, confrontation, purification, preservation, now comes recognition and unity. Modern parallel. This situation resembles moments where after deep growth, You feel a natural sense of gratitude and alignment. For example, recognizing how far you've come and feeling thankful. Valuing the clarity and strength you've gained. Wanting to live in a way that reflects that growth. You are not forced to respond. You naturally acknowledge because you see what you gained, what was preserved, what was refined. And that leads to a deeper sense of unity within yourself and with truth. And that is what this verse represents. The natural response of gratitude and alignment after realizing that nothing true was lost, only refined. Next verse. So Moses and Eleazar the priest received the gold from them, all the fashioned ornaments. Moses, conscious awareness. Eleazar the priest, discernment. Received, accepted or integrated. Gold, refined truth or purified value. Fashioned ornaments, shaped expressions of what has been refined. Now we see something beautiful. What has been refined is received. Moses and Eleazar received. This shows both awareness and discernment are in agreement to accept what has been brought forward. The gold represents truth that has passed through fire, not raw, but refined. And the ornaments show it has taken form, meaning your understanding is now shaped. Your growth is now visible. Your alignment is now expressed. So this is not just internal realization, it is expressed value. And now it is received and integrated. This shows what you have gained is now recognized, accepted, and made part of your aligned state. Modern parallel. This situation resembles moments where you begin to fully accept the growth you've experienced. For example, recognizing your strength after going through transformation. Accepting the clarity you've gained instead of doubting it. Allowing your growth to become part of your identity. You are no longer questioning it, resisting it, minimizing it. Instead, you receive it because you understand it has been refined. And what has been refined is trustworthy. So you allow it to shape how you see yourself, influence how you live, become part of your identity. And that is what this verse represents. The acceptance and integration of what has been refined, where truth becomes part of who you are. Next verse, all the gold of the offering. Gold represents refined truth, tested value, land of gold, environment of alignment, place of purity. Genesis reference, origin state of wholeness and clarity. Offering, what has been consciously aligned. This echoes directly back to Genesis, the land of Havilah, where there is gold, and the gold of that land is good. From the very beginning, gold was associated with purity, value, something untouched by distortion. So what we are seeing is a return to origin. In Genesis, gold exists in the beginning state. In Numbers, gold appears after refinement. This reveals something powerful. What is refined is what was originally pure. The process did not create gold, it revealed it. So the journey from Genesis through confrontation, through purification, leads back to the same quality of being, pure, valuable, aligned. This is why the gold is gathered, measured, offered, because it represents your restored state, not something new, but something rediscovered. Modern parallel. This situation resembles moments where, after growth, you realize you've returned to a deeper, more authentic version of yourself. For example, feeling like you've come back to clarity you once had. Recognizing that your true nature was always there beneath conditioning. Realizing your value was never lost, only covered. You begin to see you didn't become something different. You return to what was always true. And now that truth has been tested, refined, confirmed, so it carries even greater depth. And that is what this connection reveals. The gold at the end is the same gold from the beginning, not created, but uncovered through the journey back to alignment. Next verse, Numbers 31, verse 53. The men of war had taken spoil, every man for himself. Men of war, active participants in transformation. Taking spoil, what was gained through the process. Every man, individual experience. For himself, personal integration, internal ownership. Now we see something very balanced. Not everything is given away. While a portion was offered, a portion was set apart, a portion was aligned, there is also personal retention. Every man for himself. This means each person keeps, integrates, lives from what they have gained. This is important because it shows transformation is both collective, shared alignment, and personal, individual integration. No one loses their identity, experience, or growth. Instead, each person carries their own understanding, clarity, and refined value. This is not selfishness. It is ownership of transformation. Because what you learned, discovered, refined must become yours, not borrowed, not dependent, internalized. Modern parallel. This situation resembles moments where you realize your growth is deeply personal. For example, understanding that no one can live your clarity for you. Integrating lessons in a way that becomes part of your own identity. Recognizing that your journey is uniquely yours, even if others share similar paths. You begin to see growth is not just shared knowledge, it is personal embodiment. What you've gained becomes yours, shapes your life, influences your path, and no one can take it, replace it, leave it for you. That is what this verse represents. The personal ownership of transformation, where what you have gained becomes fully yours to live and embody. Next verse. So Moses and Eleazar the priest received the gold from the captains of thousands and of hundreds, and brought it into the tabernacle of meeting as a memorial for the children of Israel before the Lord. Somebody break down. Moses, conscious awareness. Eleazar, discernment. Received, accepted, integrated. Gold, refined truth, tested value. Captains, governing thoughts or leadership faculties. Tabernacle of meeting, inner dwelling place, place of awareness. Memorial, remembrance or established truth. before the Lord in the presence of truth or alignment. Now we arrive at the final step, remembrance. Everything that has been confronted, purified, refined, aligned, offered, is now brought into the tabernacle. The tabernacle represents your inner dwelling place, your awareness, your consciousness, your place of connection with truth. And the gold, refined truth, is placed there as a memorial. This means it is not forgotten. It becomes established within you. So this is not just a moment of growth. It becomes a lasting reference point, something you can return to, live from, remain grounded in. Before the Lord, meaning it is held in alignment with truth, not distorted, not forgotten, not misused, but preserved in clarity. Modern parallel. This situation resembles moments where your growth becomes something you carry with you permanently. For example, remembering lessons that shaped your life. Having a deep inner reference point that guides your decisions. Living from experiences that have become part of your foundation. You no longer forget what you've learned. No longer drifts back into old patterns easily, because something within you has been established and you can always return to it, draw from it, and live from it. And that is what this final verse represents: the establishment of refined truth within your inner life, a permanent remembrance that keeps you aligned, grounded, and aware. And before we end, let me touch on something. For a long time, many of us have read that Abraham is the father of many nations and assumed it was about biology, ethnicity, or physical descent. But let's pause and ask a simple question as usual. If the kingdom of God is within you and Christ is within you, then wouldn't that mean the language of scripture is pointing inward? So what if Abraham is not just a historical figure, but a pattern of consciousness? Who is Abraham symbolically? Abraham represents the awakened one, the one who leaves behind what is familiar to walk into what is true. He is introduced as someone called out of a land, out of a system, out of a way of thinking. Symbolically, this is the moment you begin to move from conditioning into awareness, from what you were taught into what you now see. Abraham is the part of you that responds to truth, even when it requires leaving everything behind. Now, here is where it becomes powerful. When scripture says Abraham is the father of many nations, it is not limited to physical people. Because a nation is not just a country. A nation represents a way of being, a system of thought, a pattern of life. So to say Abraham is the father of many nations is to say anyone who walks the path of alignment is walking in the pattern of Abraham. This is where many have misunderstood the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, the God of Israel has often been presented as selective. But when we read symbolically, we begin to see something different. My people are not a limited group. They are those who walk in truth, those who walk in alignment, those who live in awareness. This is not exclusion. This is invitation. Why Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? These are not just names. They represent stages of inner development. Abraham represents awakening, leaving the old. Isaac represents promise, living in trust and alignment. Jacob to Israel, to transformation, wrestling to becoming. These are stages within you. So the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob is the God present in every stage of your awakening journey. Paul confirms the pattern. This is why Paul the Apostle says, those who walk by faith are the children of Abraham. Not those who share his DNA, but those who share his alignment. Because faith is not blind belief. It is trusting what you now see inwardly. Think about this in your own life. The moment you walk away from what no longer aligns, the moment you choose truth over comfort, the moment you refuse to compromise your awareness, the moment you step into a new way of being, you are walking in the pattern of Abraham. You are becoming part of that nation. So when we say Abraham is the father of many nations, we are not talking about numbers. We are talking about access. Access to a way of being. Access to alignment. Access to truth. Access to awakening. And this is why he is not the father of a few. He is the father of all who choose to see, who choose to align, who choose to walk in truth. I'm inviting you to look again, to move beyond surface reading and begin to see inwardly. Because what if this was never about them, but about you? And in the next teaching, we are going to look at another passage that has also been widely misunderstood, Deuteronomy 20. And then we'll continue to 1 Samuel 15, not to dismiss the text, but to understand it. I'm inviting you to stay with the journey, to look again, to reflect, and to ask yourself, if this is happening within me, what is this showing me? Thank you for listening, and I will see you in the next teaching. Have a good one.